You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and today, Friday, diving into some more predictions, this time for Week 9 of the NFL at the midpoint of the season. We got a lot of interesting matchups with a lot of teams on very even playing fields, in my opinion. So a tougher week, I would say, to come up with some predictions. That being said, as always, I invite you all to comment down below. Let me hear from you, your thoughts, your opinions on this weekend's matchups. Who do you like? Who do you dislike, and why? And a reminder, no betting advice, no gambling advice. We're just here for a good time, talking winners, who's coming out on top. And so far, starting the week out strong. 1-0 with the Ravens, taking that W against the Dolphins, so we're looking to build off that here. But we'll start first with the Chicago Bears taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. This one of those games that I think was a little bit tougher to get into because you have a team with a really good defense that can force some turnovers going up against an offense that can put up a ton of points. But then on the flip side of both these teams, the offense and defense on the opposite side, a little inconsistent. Chicago, the way it stands right now, they have a defense that can force a ton of turnovers. However, last week against the Ravens looked a little bit shaky. They were not able to get after them as aggressively and ultimately came away with no turnovers after having 15 in 4 straight games leading into it. I do think, though, going up against a Joe Flacco-led offense, there is a chance that maybe this aggressive defense that is admittedly missing a handful of key guys in the secondary at a minimum could maybe come away with a turnover or two. Because Joe Flacco, we've seen, yes, since coming into Cincinnati, very good, 7 touchdowns, no interceptions. He has nearly 750 yards passing so far. He's done well in Cincinnati. However, over the last couple of seasons, and even this year prior to getting traded, he's prone to making those bad throws. He'll throw a ball or two in a place where it should not be going, and the Chicago Bears team has done a lot to come away with making big on those types of mistakes, so there is a possibility. Maybe we're not going to see the same 3 or 4 turnovers in a game that we had been getting from Chicago prior to last week, but I could see them coming away with an interception or two and maybe stealing a possession from that Cincinnati Bengals team. It's just a matter of if they can slow down T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, with all those guys like a Jalen Johnson, a Kyler Gordon, all missing from the secondary. It's going to be a tall task for Tyreek Stevenson and the rest of the guys in that secondary to slow them down. And then on the flip side of things, Cincinnati coming in, electric offense. They can put up 30-some-odd points in a game if need be, but that defense has been a problem. And you're going up against a Chicago Bears offense that has been a little bit inconsistent, and I do think it's fair to at least acknowledge, especially on Caleb Williams' end, things have not been ideal so far, especially the last few weeks. It's been a little bit ugly for him, and it's one of those things where he can come out of the gates strong, firing all over the place, balls just coming out and on time, and then you get to like the middle portions of the game, errant throws, things are not connecting the way they should be, and then sometimes they pick it up in the fourth quarter again, and it's saved them a few times this year, but with the Cincinnati Bengals defense that's looked the way it has, this could be a good opportunity for a get-right game. So if Cincinnati can't slow down the Chicago Bears and take advantage of the fact that there's no DeAndre Swift here, Rashawn Johnson's also going to be out. It's basically the Kyle Monangai show coming out of the backfield for the Chicago Bears. And while the wide receiver room basically looks like everyone but Luther Burden is going to be there for this one as he deals with his concussion, they're all dealing with some sort of injury or something that has them all listed and limited in varying practices this week on the injury report. So the question of just how healthy is that wide receiver room and how effective can they be is definitely a conversation at least worth having here. That all being said, with the fact that Trey Hendrickson's also going to be out in this game, and you have the AC joint kind of thing that's hanging and looming over Joe Flacco himself right now, while the Bengals do have a good opportunity to maybe take advantage of a Chicago Bears defense that's definitely banged up in their own right, I think the Bears could come away with a victory here. I could see a fair amount of points, but I'm a little bit nervous about Joe Flacco and just how effective he looks like, or he'll look to be able to be in this game. Once he left and obviously was dealing with something, because we saw him kind of leave the game briefly last week against the Jets before coming back, the Bengals offense basically came to a grinding halt and standstill. Something tells me that is something worth keeping in mind here. Couple in the fact that Trey Hendrickson looks like he's probably not going to be playing as well. Like I just could see this as like a get right game for Chicago. So I think I'm taking the Bears on this one. One of the more least confident or one of the more lesser confident picks that I have this week, but I'll take Chicago 27-16. Something tells me that this could be one of those ugly games for Cincinnati, and that's kind of where I'm standing on this one. Next one we have ourselves is the Vikings going into Detroit to take on the Lions here. And to put it very simply, because I think that this game has one really big key to it, and depending on how things turn out will basically dictate the direction of this game, and that's going to be J.J. McCarthy and how he fares. It sounds like he is going to play. It's definitely not going to be Carson Wentz, who apparently for the last 2.5 games for the Vikings has been playing with his shoulder hanging by a thread, and now that he's done for the season and needs to get surgery, it looks like J.J. McCarthy is going to be back in the fold. And the more I dug into this past week, and it's with stuff I'm not privy to, I try my best to cover the league, but there are some of those things that you don't really know until you're really digging into it and you get to it and you hear about it. There seems to be some chatter around Vikings faithful and just within the people that cover the Vikings that maybe J.J. McCarthy was in the situation of a soft benching. Like, I knew that J.J. McCarthy's absence to this point was a little bit confusing, and he was suiting up. He was the emergency quarterback, but he wasn't actually playing as Carson Wentz, again, for 2.5 games, basically played with his shoulder falling off his arm. Seems like some people are throwing around the soft benching term, which is an interesting one here. So if that's really the case, that tells me that Minnesota might not be, and that especially Kevin O'Connell might not be as high on J.J. McCarthy as maybe they once were, or at least a little bit worried about where he currently is in his progression. What we've got from J.J. McCarthy to this point has not been really impressive. We've basically seen like 2 good quarters of football from him in the 8 that he's basically played to this point here. So you don't have a large sample size, and it is fair to point out that, Jordan Addison wasn't there. So, he was just working with Justin Jefferson, but you still had Aaron Jones in the fold. You still had, of course, Justin Jefferson. You still had a TJ Hawkinson. You had some talented guys to work with there, but it was not great. It was not pretty. You have Detroit coming in right now, who's a literal wagon and one of the most effective teams when it comes to scoring right now. Is they're averaging nearly 31 points per game. They're 8th in rushing. They're 12th in passing right now. And with the way the run defense has looked in Minnesota, the Lions' bread and butter. If they can get Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery rolling, they're going to absolutely beat you into submission on the ground. It's going to open up the play action, and they will take advantage. And that's one of those things with an aggressive defense like Minnesota. If they don't get there in time, that play action could eventually kill them in the long run during this game. A lot of this, I do think, comes down to just what J.J. McCarthy is able to do and how good he looks, and that makes me really want to fade Minnesota for this one. I think being a division rival type of matchup, the defense over there in Minnesota could definitely cause some problems. We've seen some imperfect games from the Lions so far this season, so I do think that Minnesota has an opportunity to maybe make the game a little bit closer here, but I'm taking the Lions 28-20. Comfortable enough win where Minnesota's probably trailing for a bulk of the game here, but I don't know what to make of the J.J. McCarthy situation, and from the sounds of it, Minnesota might not be too sure as well. Looking at our next game, we got the Panthers and the Packers here, and I think the first thing you got to look at, as it was said from Dave Canales himself, you basically can't ignore the production of Rico Dowdle at this point. They wanted to give Chuba Hubbard the opportunity to come back from his injury and not lose his job while he was injured, but Rico Dowdle's just been so effective for this Panthers offense. And even in the running back 2 role that he had last week, splitting the carries with Chuba Hubbard, who ultimately got more rushing attempts, he was still outperforming him production-wise. So it sounds like they're going to lean back into Rico Dowdle here. And I think going up against the Packers run defense that has been very good so far this season, it's probably the best bet for you here, because I'm not super sold on the passing attack with Carolina, and that is one of my concerns with this team here. So you want to go with the hot hand. You want to go with the guy who was putting up big numbers for you in the absence of Chuba Hubbard. And like I said, with Green Bay's run defense coming in here, 3rd in yards per game allowed. They're 4th in yards per attempt allowed, and they've allowed only 10 runs over 10 yards or more, which is 3rd best in the NFL. A lot of that having to do with guys like linebackers Quay Walker and Edrin Cooper just plugging up all of the running lanes behind a really stout defensive line over there right now. The addition of Micah Parsons has opened up so much for the rest of the guys on that defensive line that it's unbelievable. And like I said, it's helping the linebackers funnel into their running lanes extremely effectively as well. They've combined for 61 total defensive stops between just the 2 of them. So anything that results in a successful play for the defense is labeled as one of those, and Next Gen Stats has them listed for 61. Think tackles for loss, tackles at the line of scrimmage, whether it's a run, a catch pass, or something like that. They're doing an excellent job there. So you need to go with the hot hand. And like I said, with Carolina's passing attack being very hot and cold depending on the week, and on top of that, You have Rashawn Gary and Micah Parsons who are coming in with 14 sacks as a duo. It could be a bit of a long day trying to throw the football against Green Bay. On the flip side, Carolina's defense going up against this passing attack in Green Bay. Carolina's been a pretty solid unit against teams throwing the football. They're actually 11th in yards per game allowed right now, led by J.C. Horn and Mike Jackson in the secondary. They've both done an excellent job. J.C. Horn really evolving. For somebody who dealt with so much injury woes in the early portion of his career, really evolving into one of the best corners in the NFL. And I think it's because he's in Carolina, and just the state of Carolina over the last few years is one of those names that is kind of going under the radar, but he has played exceptionally well this season and in years past recently. You probably you're going to have to see what you can do against this Packers team, but with the pass rush just not being effective, they're bottom 10 to 5, depending on the numbers and analytics and just all the metrics you look at for pass rush so far this season. Christian Watson came back recently for the team, and it seems like he's already ready to rock and roll with this passing game. I don't really know if Carolina has it in them to slow down just a deep wide receiver room with a Jordan Love who is throwing the ball with the best of them right now amongst the top quarterbacks in the NFL. And to go back to the pressure point too, when Jordan Love's not facing pressure, he's one of the best quarterbacks. He's 5th in passer rating, 5th in completion percentage at about 71%, 9th in passing yards. He has 13 touchdowns. You can't give the guy time and the ability to throw. And my concerns with how well this Packers O-line has held up this season in pass protection, going up against that pass rush, might be a long day for that Carolina secondary. I'm definitely leaning Packers on this one here. I could see Carolina, and especially if they're going to go back into leaning into Rico Dowdle and how effective he's been, to maybe give Green Bay a little bit of a run for their money. Green Bay has had some games that are maybe a little bit closer than they would like them to be, so I could see something like that sort of playing itself out, but I'm taking Green Bay. I like them for the W, 27-22. Carolina maybe gets the better of them early in the game, but ultimately Green Bay pulls away late like we've seen them in a handful of games. So give me the Packers 27-22. Good win, coming away with the W and advancing to another win, sitting only on one loss in the loss column. Following that game, we'll take a look at the Broncos and Texans here. This one I think is going to be a defensive slugfest. That's kind of what I have this pin for right now. You have Houston clinging on to their playoff hopes right now. Meanwhile, Denver currently, they own the AFC West. It is theirs to lose as it currently stands right now with the best record in that division. And you have the Chargers and Chiefs just trailing behind you. So they're trying to do everything they can to maintain that hold that they have on the division here. Texans O-line, when it comes to protecting C.J. Stroud, is one of those things that early in the season kind of looked like it was shaping up to be just like how it was last year or some variation of it, but it's actually gotten pretty good. You see the way things have looked the past few weeks, just 9 pressures, no sacks allowed against San Francisco last week, and compared to where they were, like I said, those first 3 weeks or so, it's a marked improvement for them, and it's good because they've got to be ready this week. Denver boasts by far the best pass rush in the NFL, and it's not really close. They sit on 36 sacks as a team so far this season, led by Nick Bonito, who I believe has 8 for the team, if I'm remembering correctly there. But 36 sacks is the most by 10, so second place has 26, and that's the Rams behind them there. 141 pressures on the season, most. On top of that, a 45.9% pressure rate, which is the only team above 40%, and mind you, they're near 6% above. And then an 11.7 sack rate, so nearly 12, and they're the only team in double digits right now. So what they're doing right now, combined with the fact that they love to blitz and bring the pressure, CJ Stroud needs to get the ball out quick, and this pass protection, again, for the improvements we have seen from them over the last few weeks, is going to really be put to the test. On the flip side, for the Broncos, offense in Denver has definitely been inconsistent over the last handful of weeks. We've seen some really good games. We've seen some really bad games. And right now, with the way this game is shaping up and what we've kind of seen from the Texans defense, they've got studs all over the football field, from the edge rushers and Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. being one of the best pass rushing duos in the NFL. Then you also have one of the best cornerbacking duos in the NFL in Derek Stingley Jr. and a Kamari Lassiter. They definitely are going to have their work cut out for them, Denver that is, when it comes to trying to move the football through the air and also ultimately even trying to run the football as well. I mean, Houston right now, first in points per game allowed amongst all teams in the NFL right now, just 14.7. They have the 4th best pass defense and the 5th best run defense in terms of yards per game allowed. They're shutting things down, and I do think in this one, defenses ultimately win out here. I'll be interested to see how the run game fares in this one for both of these teams, because both defenses defensive fronts are really tough to move against and can be a problem. And I think whoever can control the football on the ground, open up the play action first, can probably come away with the win here. I'm leaning Denver, though. I like the Broncos. I have them winning 21-17, and it's going to be like pulling teeth trying to get to there, but I don't expect a lot of points in this one. If we get a lot of points, the defenses will have had to have forgotten that they had themselves a game, because both of these teams boast some really strong defenses, like playoff caliber level defenses. Denver's looking like one of the most elite defenses in the NFL right now, especially with what they're doing getting after the quarterback. But I do like Denver, 28-18, lower scoring affair. Going to be a bit of a grind for this one here. Probably not one of the most pretty games to watch if you're somebody who likes to watch a ton of games at the same time like myself. I see one of those games you'll have up and you'll look over and you'll see, something along the lines of like 7-6 midway through the second quarter, and you're like, yeah, that sounds about right. But lower scoring affair. Denver Broncos, though, getting the job done in my eyes. Falcons and Patriots are up next on this one, and I think the first question we've got to ask is basically what version of the Atlanta Falcons offense do we get here? Now, it sounds like Michael Penix is going to be good to go and is gearing up to play this Sunday. It's definitely been a rocky season for him so far. 61% completion rate, 5 passing touchdowns to 3 interceptions. We have not seen the step forward that I think everyone in Atlanta was hoping to see going into his year number 2 as he works his way through essentially his first season of games played so far. But a huge piece of why this team is at least still in the position that they're in, fighting for a playoff spot, has to be Bijan Robinson and what he has been able to do, both as a running back and as a pass catcher for this team. Now, Miami was able to shut him down last week, very surprisingly, I might add. I did not anticipate Miami being able to do what they were able to do against Bijan. And you got a New England run defense that ranks second in the NFL right now. They're amongst the best. You got some big guys in the middle there in Milton Williams. You also have yourself Christian Barmore as well. And the linebackers, Mac Hollins, doing an excellent job in the run game as well, plugging up holes in the middle there. A defense that is starting to get stronger and stronger as the season goes by. You also have some varying degrees of success against New England, though. While they're very stout in the run, teams what do you want to say? They've been fairly able to move the football through the air, depending on like the week and who it is that's playing against them. They rank 22nd in terms of yards per game allowed so far, despite the fact that they've got Christian Gonzalez, Carlton Davis, and a Marcus Jones, who's one of the best slot corners in the NFL that they just paid a couple of days ago. You're hoping that for this one, Drake London comes back in. Your elite talent that you have in Drake London, a Darnell Mooney, who is a beautiful complement to his game here. Bijan Robinson out of the backfield. Kyle Pitts working the middle of that football field can maybe take that weaker passing defense to task and see if they can exploit that. They have been really good over the last few weeks as Christian Gonzalez has worked his way back in. Like, some of those passing numbers are slightly skewed because it was prior to Christian Gonzalez coming back into the fold. But I do think that you have enough talent offensively in Atlanta that they could at least challenge what they've been able to do in New England the last few weeks. On the flip side, it's going to be another test for Drake May. This Atlanta Falcons defense, no slouch by any means, especially when it comes to stopping quarterbacks from doing what they love to do, and that is throwing the football. And right now, Drake May's throwing it with the best of them. He has by far the best deep ball in the NFL so far this season. On top of that, he's first in completion percentage overall amongst all quarterbacks in general. So going up against the league's best passing defense in terms of yards per game allowed, I'll be very curious to see how those guys over there do their thing, because you have A.J. Terrell, you have Jesse Bates, Xavier Watts has been phenomenal in his rookie season so far here. But then also the pass rush. While the sack total might not be as high as you'd expect it to be, they are a team that's already had their bye week as well, so that doesn't work in their favor. When it comes to pressure and sack rate, they rank top 10 in both, so they're effective at disrupting quarterbacks. They're effective at getting to the quarterbacks on a per down basis. So this is one of those things where Drake May facing another tough test. He had a really tough one last week, and honestly, the Patriots O-line didn't look too great. Myles Garrett had himself a day, and while I don't think the Atlanta Falcons have a Myles Garrett on their side of the football when it comes to defense, I do think that the pass rush, the way they've been able to dial things up and how effective they have been to this point, could pose a problem, especially for that younger left side of the offensive line. You also have no Ramondre Stevenson, so I do think with a rookie running back who seems like he's going to be getting a lot of looks and hasn't gotten a lot so far this season, last week being one of the first bigger games he's had, I think this is one of those things where You're going to rely on Drake May. He's going to have to challenge this defense if you're New England, that is. And ultimately, it's up to Atlanta to do what they've done best, and that's slow down Drake May and this passing attack. You got Stephon Diggs out there. You got a couple of good tight ends in Austin Hooper and Hunter Henry, who have honestly looked great with Drake May throwing them the football. Kayshon Boutte starting to emerge. So tough task for both of these football teams in my eyes because you have two really good defenses. This is another one of those games where I see the point total being a little bit lower. And for me, I am leaning New England. This is one of those games where I think it's fairly tight. I definitely give an edge to the Patriots, but like if this was in Atlanta, there's a good possibility I'm taking the Falcons on this one, but I like New England. I think they get the job done. Again, lower scoring affair, points going to be coming at a premium. I like them something in the ballpark like 23-19. Now we'll look at the 49ers and Giants, and this is basically the hospital football game here. Both of these teams, man, need to have like an ambulance parked on their sideline at all times because everyone's coming in with serious injuries. And as it currently stands right now, for the Giants especially, because this is really concerning with the defense as hard as it is, it's confirmed that Cordell Flott, Paulson Adebo, and Art Green are all out. On top of that, Chauncey Golston as well. So you have three guys coming out of your secondary already, and that's not ideal going up against a 49ers team that might not be at its most healthiest either, but they are certainly healthier offensively than they are defensively. That's where their injuries lie. So there's a chance that maybe we see points in this game, but San Francisco, despite all of their injuries, has shown that they can hold teams back from scoring. And after what we saw from the Giants last week, I'm a little bit concerned about that potential offensive production. You obviously lost Cam Scatabo as well, and that was a big shot to this offense. So now you're dealing with that. You already had lost Malik Neighbors a handful of weeks ago. So now you're looking at a guy like Tyrone Tracy, who flashed last year a lot, ultimately lost his starting role to Cam Scatabo. He's going to step back in. He can run with the football. He can also catch out of the backfield. So you're going to lean on him, but you're basically just putting the ball in your rookie quarterback's hand, who has 12 touchdowns, I believe, since taking over as the starting quarterback, total touchdowns, that is, as the starting quarterback of the New York Giants. And you're going to tell him, just you got to go make plays, dude. Brian Daboll's in a situation where his job is on the line, and I feel like you can kind of see that. And he's always been a more higher-tempered type of guy on the sideline, but it feels a little extra edgy right now for him. It's a very wild scenario for the Giants to be in, where you just have your rookie quarterback going, all of your stars that you've been working with and building around him with are all out, and now you're just hoping that guys like a Darius Slayton or a Wan'Dale Robinson or Tyrone Tracy can step up big for you here. On the flip side for San Francisco, like I said, they're dealing with their own injuries. Obviously, the question right now that everyone seems to be asking is Brock Purdy going to be able to play? His turf toe thing has been taking him quite a while to get back from. Mac Jones' performance, as he's been in the relief of him, has kind of tailed off a bit, and it's kind of gotten a little bit ugly over the last few weeks. 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. His completion rate in the last 3 weeks has tanked about 10% or so. So it doesn't seem like we're trending in the right direction anymore with the initial start that we got out of the San Francisco 49ers and Mac Jones together. But if Brock Purdy's able to go, and he's at the very least able to get in the pocket and just be able to deal, you have George Kittle now. Christian McCaffrey's obviously doing his thing. It sounds like Jawan Jennings is going to be good to go as well, while you might not have Ricky Pearsall, and who knows when Brandon Ayuk is going to ever return. He has one of the longest returns from an ACL injury, or is it an Achilles injury? One of those two that I feel like I've seen in a while. At this point right now, a lot of, I think, San Francisco's potential success in this game is going to be banked off of whether Brock Purdy is able to play or not. I do have some concern for San Francisco and how they're going to deal with the edge rushers that New York has, because you have a really good group of guys there, but minus a Chauncey Golston, you are a little bit thinner there, but you're still dealing with Brian Burns. You're still dealing with a Kayvon Thibodeau. You're still dealing with an Abdul Carter. Like, you have a really good trio of guys coming off the edge there, and that is definitely something I'll be keeping an eye on, but ultimately, it's the hospital game, and it's a tough one to kind of come to a concrete decision on. I'll take San Francisco just because something tells me that the Giants, while, again, the 49ers are banged up themselves, the Giants have too many injuries in their secondary right now for me to really like them enough to be able to defend the talent that is at least readily available to whoever ends up being the quarterback for San Francisco in this game here. So I'll take them 23-20. I do think the Giants make this one interesting because they have some good wins so far this year. Yeah, they're coming off of a tough blowout loss last week, but San Francisco's not the Philadelphia Eagles. And with this game also being in New York as well, I do think that ultimately they'll benefit from having the home field advantage, and that might work work in their favor to help keep this game close. But I do think the 49ers ultimately come away with that tight 23-20 victory. This next one here, Colts and Steelers. I'm definitely looking forward to this matchup here because the way Indianapolis has been playing this season, as somebody who grew up rooting for the Colts, it is just one of those things that every single week I watch them play and I say to myself multiple times, I cannot believe that this is actually happening right now. Indianapolis comes in with 31 touchdowns scored as an offense, the only team over 30, averaging basically 34 points per game, which is first by a bit of a significant margin. Then you have yourself scoring on 60.8% of scoring offensive drives, only team within the 60s. And then on top of that, India's only scored less than 30 points 2 times this season. They have been putting up numbers, and at this rate right now, I'm not really sure what defense, other than like a very select few, like I'd maybe look at like Denver. Denver and the Rams ultimately gave them some trouble. They ultimately lost that football game. Like, there's not a lot of defenses that I'd look at that I'd go, yeah, they could probably slow them down. The Colts are rolling right now offensively. You have Jonathan Taylor, who is first in like every single rushing category you could possibly come up with. Yards, touchdowns, attempts, yards per attempt, like you name it. He's basically first. Yards per attempt, he's actually second at 5.9. I forget who it is, but somebody's sitting at 6 yards per attempt right now. Tyler Warren, leading tight ends right now in receiving yards. He has been phenomenal as a rookie so far right now. He's also 6th in receptions for tight ends, and he's averaging 13.3 yards per reception, which is 4th amongst tight ends. So already one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the NFL. Their O-line's been unbelievable. They've got arguably one of the deepest wide receiver rooms in the NFL with Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell. On top of that, who else you have? Alec Pierce, who is one of the best deep ball catchers in the NFL, and the only reason that's not talked about more is because he keeps missing time. But as far as tracking a football and getting after it deep down the field, Alec Pierce does it pretty good and just about as good as anybody else right now. And then you have Pittsburgh and their defense, who allowing 30 points or more in 4 games so far this season. Seattle did allow a special team score against Seattle, so that did give them that number there. But ultimately, the defense has been struggling for the most part, and they're 1-3 in those games where they've allowed 30 or more points. So their work is going to be cut out for them. That one win they had ultimately being the game against the New York Jets to get the season going here. But the pass rush is where I think everything is going to come down for this one here. You've got to disrupt Daniel Jones and what he's been doing, and so far teams have not really been able to do so. And at one point, you had a 3-game stretch where you racked up 17 sacks. That was against New England, Minnesota, and Cleveland in that 3-game stretch there. 17 of your 22 sacks coming in that 3-game stretch. So you can get after the quarterback. It's just a matter of being able to do it against some of the better offensive lines in the NFL. Pass defense is giving up 273 yards per game as well. They've given up over 300 yards passing in 3 of their last 4 games. So I do have some concerns there. On the other side, something that is kind of bothering me about the Pittsburgh Steelers that has been kind of a recurring theme for the last handful of seasons right now, they've got to stop settling for 3, and they've got to find their way to get into the end zone. The way the Steelers team has worked for the better part of like the last 4 years, almost 5 at this point now, it feels like they're able to move the ball and then they stall out somewhere within field goal range. And I actually went back and just kind of ran some of the numbers because I was curious if this was just recency bias of the last couple of years or if this is something that's kind of been a thing. And other than 2023, they've been ranked somewhere within the top 3 in field goals attempt and or made in 3 of the last 4 seasons going back to 2021. So this is like a legit thing that the Steelers have struggled with for a handful of seasons now. And one of the big things that's really bothering me right now about Pittsburgh has been the inability of Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf to really get on like that elite QB to wide receiver page that you would honestly, and I know Aaron Rodgers is in the later stages of his career, but with his talent and the ability of DK Metcalf, a connection that you would hope is a little bit more consistent than what we've seen. I'm pretty sure that DK Metcalf's completion percentage is something along the lines of 61% when being targeted right now, which is just not nearly good enough for what you are relying on him to be and how much money you're paying him to play with. So it's one of those things where you look at Indianapolis, and like I said, you're talking 32 touchdowns scored so far this season right now to the 19 that Pittsburgh has put up. The offense cannot settle for field goals in this game, especially if the defense shows up and they look like the 4 games that they've struggled in as opposed to the 3 games they've looked pretty good in. If they can't keep pace there is a problem. And the way I see it, I could see maybe a good 2, maybe 3 sacks coming from Pittsburgh here. The pass rush is a solid group altogether, and I could see them giving some fits to this Indianapolis O-line altogether, but I don't know how Pittsburgh keeps pace. And I think ultimately Indianapolis comes away with another 30 points or so in this game, just because we've seen it already too many times from Pittsburgh right now, and they're not in a good place at this current moment here. If this was a couple of weeks ago, I'd probably have a different conversation, but I like Indianapolis something along the lines of like 30-23. And we didn't even talk about their defense. Their defense has been disruptive enough that I think they could put the Steelers in that same situation of, they might let them move, but they're not going to bend, or they're not going to break. They'll just bend and force them to settle for field goals as the Colts just kind of keep going down the field, hitting touchdowns after touchdowns the way they've been scoring this year. So I like the Colts 30-23. I'll be interested to see if this one ends up going in a different way, though, but there's been a few times where I thought Pittsburgh at home definitely getting the job done, but I kind of feel like Indianapolis might be coming into Pittsburgh and getting this one. Chargers and Titans, not a whole lot on this one. This is a definite trap game for the Chargers, absolutely, but the way that this Tennessee Titans team currently stands, I'm not giving them much of a chance against really anybody that they're going to be facing the remainder of the season, unless it's another really bad team. I think the Chargers come away with a pretty handed win here. Them getting their offensive lineman back last week clearly showed you that this offense is still a pretty good group. It's just a matter of they've been dealing with a lot of injuries. I mean, they're missing running backs. They were missing several offensive linemen from the start of the season to a good chunk of the season up until recently, as both Trey Pipkins and Joe Alt came back into the fold last week. So I think the Chargers are going to kind of walk all over the Titans on this one here. I know there's a lot of conversation about Mike McCoy getting the opportunity to go up against his former team, but unfortunately, and we've seen the reporting and just kind of what people are saying about this Titans team and how badly it's built, and some of the injuries they're also dealing with as well. If the Chargers find a way to blow this game, and they did find a way to blow this basically same game against the Giants a few weeks ago, my jaw will be on the floor for the end of it, but I do think that the Chargers are coming into this one with a game like that maybe in the back of their mind going, we can't allow that to happen again, especially with how tight the race is in the AFC West right now. This is like even though it's a game you should be winning, you kind of got to have it type of game. With the Chiefs emerging and Denver's defense as good as it's been, you got to hold your ground in the West. You cannot be losing to this game here. So I do think the Chargers win. I have them about 28-10, something in that ballpark. I would like to give them more points in this one here, but something tells me that, again, trap game, I could see maybe Tennessee making it a little bit closer until LA pulls away in the second half of the game, but I still think ultimately when it's all said and done, a comfortable enough 28-10 victory. We'll look at the Saints and the Rams next, and a big conversation here. Tyler Shuck, how does he look? Getting his first start in the NFL here. New Orleans offense has been pretty awful to watch, to simply put it, so far this season. 16 points per game is fourth lowest in the NFL right now, with a Rams team that's coming in averaging nearly 10 more points a game. They're also racking up nearly 360 total yards of offense per game right now. So the Saints and Tyler Shuck have their work cut out for them. And when you look at the way this Rams defense plays, their pass rush is definitely the big thing that we got to talk about, especially going up against a first-year quarterback in Shuck. They're the team that's right behind, not right behind the Broncos. They're the team behind the Broncos, but are a little bit of a ways behind the Broncos because they're so far ahead in sack totals. But 26 sacks in the season, good for second in the NFL. And it's a team that's been on a bye week now on top of that. Fourth best sack rate, fifth in pressure rate, led by Byron Young, who has been unbelievable for them right now, amongst the top in terms of individual sack numbers right now at 9. And then opposite of him, Jared Verse, his sack total a little bit lower, but he's very good at pressuring QBs and sending them into Byron Young's way, apparently, with the 31 pressures he has, which is a team high right now. The defense also allowing only 8 passing touchdowns so far this season. This is one of those games where this is quite a first test kind of feeling for Tyler Shuck and the Saints doing this to him here. So I'll be very interested to see how that fares on his end. You have the Rams coming in and their offensively, obviously Matthew Stafford and the way he's been able to deal today or this season so far and going into this one here. And then there's the conversation. It sounds like Puka Nacua is going to be back as well and good to go, which with the way this Saints defense has looked, hasn't necessarily been the most impressive by any means. This one could get ugly. This one could definitely get ugly. However, I do have to respect the fact that the Saints defense has kept games really close this season. So while I do think the Rams should run away with this game, I kind of go back to you look at their win over the Ravens a few weeks ago, just a 17-3 win over a far inferior team that was still pretty banged up at that given point. We've seen the Rams let some lesser teams hang around, so I like the Rams. They'll get a nice, comfortable 7-point win, 23-16, but don't be surprised if the Saints are kind of making them earn this. Especially with it being in, this is when it's in LA, excuse me. For some reason, I was thinking it was in New Orleans, but despite that, even at home, Rams can let teams hang around, a la the Ravens. I do think the Rams get the job done, but again, Saints they've been forcing teams to really beat them this year, and it's not been one of those easy wins for anyone. It's been a win, but it's just not been an easy win, so I could see the Saints hanging around. Again, 23-16 Rams, but the Saints are annoying and a thorn in their side the whole way through. This next game we're going to be looking at, we got ourselves another yuck bowl here as we're looking at the Jaguars going into Las Vegas to take on the Raiders. Jacksonville trending in the just complete wrong direction after a strong start to the season, at least record-wise. And then Las Vegas, who, I mean, you got your win over the Patriots and one other win in between there, and it's just been kind of ugly for Las Vegas so far for the most of the duration of this season here. And it all starts with Las Vegas and Geno Smith. If he cannot stop turning the football over the way he has, it could be a long season for this team, and we could be seeing an eventual quarterback shift if we're not already seeing it this week. Geno Smith, 7 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. It's been pretty ugly. On the flip side, you have Jacksonville's offense, and it's honestly not been much prettier coming off the loss that they just had to the Rams not too long ago prior to their bye week. For whatever reason, their offense seems to be flatlining as well. They just lost Travis Hunter now as well to IR. Seems like a non-contact injury to the knee. That is not great. And Brian Thomas Jr., who has not had nearly the season I think anyone was anticipating after the strong rookie campaign he had, where a lot of people were labeling him as one of the best deep ball threats in the NFL. It's crazy to consider where both of these teams stand, because I've always looked at Geno as like a solid quarterback that you can rely on from his time in Seattle, obviously, once he started to kind of turn his career back around. But how things have devolved in Las Vegas for him so far has not been great. And then on the flip side, like I said, Jacksonville, I thought this offense would be a little bit more explosive at this point. If there was something that I would pick out from this game that I ultimately think wins one of these two teams this Yuck Bowl award, it's going to be the ground game. Both of these run defenses are solid, not great by any means. Jacksonville is actually pretty good. 91 yards per game allowed for Jacksonville. Of all the struggles they've had, because they can't stop a nosebleed in the passing game, and that is something that maybe Geno Smith could take advantage of. Las Vegas allowing about 103 yards per game on the ground as well. This is one of those, look at the running backs, see who has a stronger game on the ground. They're probably controlling the ball more. They're taking care of the ball better, and that's the team that's probably coming away with the win. You look at Ashton Genty, who seems to be finding his footing a little bit, averaging about 4 yards per attempt, 445 yards on the ground, to Travis Etienne's 5.3 yards per attempt, and about 500 and some change on the ground. I'm looking to the running backs on this one here. Whoever can come away with a stronger, more controlled game on the ground, I think comes away with the win. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, but when I look at this game and I try to come up with like a score prediction, something tells me just awful offense. It's not going to be fun to watch. And I'm going to take Jacksonville. And again, if I didn't have to predict this game, I don't think I would, but I have to here. I'm obligated. I'm going to take the Jaguars like 17-9, something within that realm. Something just tells me ugly game, ugly score, and you walk away going, well, at least we got the win if you're Jacksonville in my eyes. But this is one of those games that you probably don't want to watch if you don't have to. Next up, we're looking at the Chiefs and Bills, the NFL's money matchup here. Who needs to win this game, in your opinion, more, the Chiefs or the Bills? I'm going to leave that question with you all. I personally don't really have an answer on this one. Like I could feel like I could build a case for either one of these teams, with the Chiefs needing to cover ground in the AFC West, and the Bills, and the concern I have for them if they take another loss to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in Buffalo again. I'm worried about the direction the season would head in off of that. So I'm curious to hear what you all think. That being said, what I'm looking at here, first and foremost, is Bills defense. That has definitely had some hit or miss games this season. Really strong one last week. You look at how they fared against the Atlanta Falcons, though, a couple weeks prior to that. So like, you have good games, you have bad games, things that can make you feel good, things that can make you feel concerned here. But when you look at Kansas City in their last 6 games, winners of 5 of those last 6, and they're averaging 31 points per game as it stands. Rashee Rice's return is what I think is going to bring this Chiefs offense back to maybe not the levels of like when Tyreek Hill was still around in their heyday of the explosive offensive Chiefs, but something that will make this offense be a threat week in and week out for defenses to deal with. He comes back. He's already got 16 catches for 135 yards and 3 scores through the air. Patrick Mahomes in that same time span is also playing well. 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's dealing. He's able to do things with his legs. He's been doing a lot with his legs this season, and the run game's come to life the last couple of weeks, especially with the return of Rashee Rice. But even when Xavier Worthy got back into the fold, things opened up for Travis Kelce. The ground game got going. Patrick Mahomes didn't have to be the team's leading rusher. A lot of things have started opening up in the last couple of weeks for this offense, like 2 or 3, I would say. You're going to be without Isaiah Pacheco, but I do still think that Kareem Hunt, despite the age that he is at right now, playing really well. I think you can lean on him. You can lean on, is it Brashard Smith, I believe, is the backup rookie as well. So I'm not super worried about the ground game just being eliminated because of no Isaiah Pacheco. I think you still have enough depth and playmaking ability there. So I'll be curious to see how Buffalo fares, because depending on what they're trying to stop, it's very hot or it's very cold. They are good at stopping teams through the air, but they have a really tough time stopping teams on the ground, which is kind of like the polar opposite of how I feel about this Chiefs offense right now. I feel like I can count on their passing attack. I'm still not really sold on their run game, though. So it's an interesting matchup defensively to offensively with strengths to weakness here. And then on top of that, you look at just kind of how things have played out for Buffalo this season. They seem to find ways to not be good at certain things and like the worst possible opportunities. And some of that might have to do with some of the injuries they've dealt with, whatever that may be. Like they were missing Terrell Bernard, Matt Milano, Ed Oliver at various points in the season. You're now missing Ed Oliver again. Maxwell Harrison, your draft pick from this year, didn't even start playing till last week. So it's one of those things where I'm curious to see how Buffalo comes into this game and how they answer a Chiefs offense that's finding themselves. On the flip side, for the Chiefs defensively, I am very curious to see how they handle James Cook, who is earning every single dollar he signed for this past offseason, sitting on 753 yards rushing, which is second most in the NFL, only to Jonathan Taylor, who's having an all-world season right now. 6 yards per attempt, league best, which is actually the running back I was forgetting about earlier. We were talking about the 5.9 that Jonathan Taylor is currently working at. Only player at 6 yards per attempt so far on the ground this season, and he also has 7 rushing touchdowns to go with it. Casey's run defense throughout the season has been like hit or miss, but the last 3 weeks, though, they've gotten really, really good and tough to go up against, allowing about 61 yards per game in those last 3, keeping all 3 of those teams below 100 yards rushing, and that includes the Detroit Lions, who love to pound the rock. This is one of those games where you need Chris Jones. You need George Karlaftis to be able to do what they do up front on that defensive line, but you're leaning on your linebackers more than anything else. So that's Nick Bolton, Leo Chenal, Drew Tranquill, those guys to be able to plug up those running lanes and stop James Cook from just absolutely torching them the way he has the majority of defenses he's come across this season here. I think this game is going to be a really good one. I anticipate another Bills-Chiefs classic. Kansas City going into Buffalo, always a really interesting angle for this one because Buffalo definitely needs a win over Kansas City, in my opinion. And again, I am very concerned about where this season heads if they take this loss once again to Kansas City, especially at home. And then on the flip side, Kansas City needs this because they've got to maintain their ground in the AFC West. They can't fall behind another game from Denver where Denver's sitting at 5-2 to their 4-3. They can't afford that at this point. Ultimately, though, I think I'm going Kansas City. Something in my gut's telling me KC. Something is also telling me the Mahomes magic seems to be finding itself. And it's one of those corny, like cheesy terms that's coined by some of the analysts and commentary teams that love to spout off about Mahomes magic. I know the NFL loves that phrase, but he is finding ways to make plays this season despite the amount of injuries that they've dealt with and keeping that team afloat during that time frame. And now that Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy are back, they're taking people away from Travis Kelce, who is now finding himself open more and being able to make plays. It feels like this offense is figuring it out. It feels like this Chiefs team might be turning back into a more offensively dominant force than people would like to believe. So I think I'm going Kansas City. I have them going 28-24, and I could see it be one of those things, you're down 3, 24-21, Kansas City game-winning drive type deal. Something tells me the Chiefs can get it done here. So I'll take Kansas City for the W. Very tight contested, down to the wire type of victory, but the Chiefs walk away with the win. And then last but certainly not least, Seahawks and Commanders for Sunday Night Football. After missing last week, Jaden Daniels is back. And once again, he does not have Terry McLaurin. The one game that Terry McLaurin has played basically all season, he'd come back with Jaden Daniels, and you don't have him once again. Super unfortunate how that keeps working itself out, and it sounds like there's no timetable for McLaurin's return as well. Seattle's coming in. They're looking to maintain not only their dominance in the NFC West, but also the NFC conference as a whole. I look at Seattle right now as one of the best teams in the NFC. Their defense has been playing really well. Mike McDonald is doing excellent things over there. Surprise, surprise. But then ultimately, Sam Darnold and what this offense has been able to do is what's really blown me away. I was one of those Sam Darnold doubters, and I still kind of am. Like, I have this weird thing, and we have a bigger sample size with Sam Darnold to this point because obviously he had a strong season last year that ended in a collapse when it mattered most. But like, I'm having the same issue with Daniel Jones and the Colts right now where I just don't believe in it, but it's happening and I have to at least acknowledge it. Sam Darnold is doing an excellent job. And a lot of it also has to do with the fact that Seattle's offensive line is protecting him extremely well. Sitting on just 9 sacks so far this season. Sam Darnold's tied for first in yards per attempt. He's got 12 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. And if you've been watching, 2 of those interceptions aren't even his fault. They're just really bad bounces. Like, one's a bounce off of a helmet that just happened to angle directly into a defender's hand against Tampa Bay a few weeks ago. And then he has like a tipped ball against, if I'm remembering, I think it was like Pittsburgh. I think Cameron Hayward got his arms up and batted the ball up into the air or something like that. So he's been money when it comes to throwing the football for the most part this season. And you see like the rapport that he has built and that connection with Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's playing like honestly the best wide receiver in the NFL. 16.4 yards per reception. He's first in receiving yards, and he's now had a bye week on top of it. Still well in the lead too, might I add. And Washington's given up a lot of yards through the air right now. They're in the top 10 in terms of yards per game allowed through the air. And they've given up 15 passing touchdowns, which also puts them in the top 10. So they have not been perfect slowing teams down through the air. On the flip side, you look at that offense, though, with Washington. It sounds like Laramie Tunsil is at least potentially going to be back in this game. That is going to be huge for them at left tackle. Seattle, though, tough defense to go against. And the in and out thing with Jaden Daniels this season is really worrying me, especially against this unit. Like, they're only allowing about 19 points per game and 4.7 yards per play, which is third best in the NFL, tied for third best, excuse me. The struggles we've seen from Washington, and we have seen some flashes from them in varying stages this season. Like, we've seen some bigger games from Deebo Samuel here and there. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt has like big games, and he has like not so big, honestly, really not good big game. Wow, holy smokes. Not having good games, excuse me, tripping all over my tongue there. So it's one of those things where I don't really know what we're going to get from this Washington team. And yes, Seattle's traveling. They're going from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast, but they're coming off a bye. They've got to be feeling pretty good where they currently stand. And you have a Commanders team that people are still somewhat okay about, maybe not as nearly as high as they were on coming into the season. It just does not feel like a Washington Commanders win to me. And I'm having a really hard time buying into the offense right now with just in and out of the amount of people that are in and out. Jaden Daniels obviously being the big one there, but not having Terry McLaurin again is tough. Like, yeah, you're getting some splash plays here and there from guys like Luke McCaffrey, depending on the week, and sure, Jaden Daniels, how healthy is he right now? That is the other thing. And how much is he able to move with his legs? Because a big part of his game last season was his ability to make things happen with his legs. Is he going to be able to do that in this game, especially against a defense in Seattle that's as good as they are and as disciplined as they are? I don't know. I don't like where the Commanders stand right now, so I'm leaning Seattle. I could see them maybe, especially being at home, playing a little bit better than if this game was in Seattle. Like, if it was in Seattle, I'm taking like a Seattle route. In this case, I think Washington can at least maybe hang around a bit, but I'm taking Seattle 28-21 for this one. It's just, there's too much going on with Washington as far as health is concerned for me to really be able to buy into this offense right now, especially after what we saw last week. I know that obviously Jaden Daniels wasn't in that one. It was Marcus Mariota, but there's just too many things not going right for Washington right now for me to want to go with them in a primetime game like this against the Seahawks that in my eyes are kind of rolling right now. So give me Seattle 28-21 to wrap up the Sunday predictions. But those are my picks for Sunday. Monday Night Football matchup will come out on Sunday, so make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss out on that one. We got Cardinals and Cowboys, which is a wild Monday Night Football game to have. That's not the best game out there, but it is the game that we have for Monday night. So we will predict that game Sunday before the early window kicks off and gets going. So again, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.